So when we were launching chocolate, right, it was really about designing a product and building a brand that was distinct and different, which means by nature we were developing a new category. If we want to be that bold from the get-go of defining our name, our brand, our product, we need that to then follow through into everything we do.
A lot of modern marketers don't like to do outdoor and traditional type media, but we know that when you do it, people go online and they start searching, and then they go to the website or the app store and they start downloading. So we saw that actually happen.
But at the end of the day, it boils down to the fact that at a business level, we had goals, right? We wanted to achieve a certain target AUM by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have a certain number of customers on our platform by the end of the year. They were harsh targets, and when I say harsh, I mean they were challenging. They were big dreams, right?
Well, and when you see banks start copying our work, so I think the Ching was copied, right, by about many
different people. Yeah. At one point during our marketing, when we were at our peak, all extremely integrated, excited, really, really happy with what we were doing, Facebook shut off our account.
Oh,
like overnight,
really?
Which was terrifying.
Hello and welcome to the CMO Office podcast. My name is Nikki Taylor. I'm here to help my fellow marketers find their seat in the C-suite. I'm joined today by some wonderful guests. First up I have is Anushka Yadav, the Chief Creative Officer for Chocolate Finance, and her agency partner, Andy Greenaway, the Chief Executive and Creative Officer for the Tao of Advertising. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So today we're going to have a deep dive into the really big, splashy launch that Chocolate Finance did. I mean, you couldn't have been in Singapore last year and not noticed it. But before we get in and deep diving into what you did, how you did it, and how you got that budget, that's what we marketers want to know. First, if both of you sort of tell me sort of what your role is for Chocolate Finance. I know you're on the agency side, but Anushka, what's your role there in the actual company?
I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Chocolate Finance. I run their brand, their user experience, and the creative vision generally for the company. So anything creative, whether it's your websites, your apps, your brand work, your marketing work, the emails that you get sent, it goes through my team.
Perfect. And Andy, what was your role in this?
Well, we're the agency, so we worked with Chocolate Finance all the way from the brand identity through to the advertising, through to programmatic, and worked with a whole team of other agencies as well. Mm-hmm. But I think we were the main brand agency to help launch the whole thing.
Big job.
Very big job.
I suppose, I know you've got like 300 awards under you, so I think that another one's probably going to come. So what I want to know, and what most marketers want to know, is what was the rationale? When you started pulling this together, you went big. Like we're talking celebrities, Henry Golding, you went influencers like Smiling Afro, I know, he's a friend of a friend, Ben. You took over Tanjong Pagar, right? MRT station, like I said, no one could not see it. On the buses, it was there, radio, digital, everything. So you didn't just do it small, you went big. What was that rationale behind that?
Before we talk about the rationale, I'll take a quick step back and introduce Chocolate Finance as a brand, right?
Perfect.
Chocolate Finance is a happy new place for customers spare cash. It's where you can get a good return on your savings without all the usual hoops that you'd need to jump through to get a high return. And you can see your returns every single day in the app, and it's extremely simple for you to get a good return, essentially, which is kind of different to what others do in the market. So when we were launching chocolate, right, it was really about designing a product and building a brand that was distinct and different, which means by nature, we were developing a new category. We were not a bank. We're not your standard asset manager, even though our license is an asset management license. We were designing something that was meant to feel different. It was meant for you to feel that your money is happy. It was meant for you to feel a different sense of joy when you interact with your money rather than the usual frustration or the usual mundane nature of finances, right? And so when we started to develop the product, we developed it with that ethos, right? The brand name, Chocolate Finance, is not your usual name.
I was going to say that's a sweet disruptor there, just the name itself. I mean, wow.
So actually, when we asked our founder the reason why we came up with the name Chocolate Finance, right? He says, well, when I was thinking about designing Chocolate Finance, I wanted people to feel happy. And what makes me feel happy? Chocolate makes me feel happy. So why not call it Chocolate Finance? And then we really ran with that, right? We were like, you know what, if we want to be that bold from the get-go of defining our name, our brand, our product, we need that to then follow through into everything we do. So the way we chose to develop our product features was very much looking at the things in the market that cause frustration or pain to our customers and removing it and designing the product that way. Similarly, when we were designing our brand, we wanted that to also be extremely distinct and different and instantly evoke a feeling of happiness, which is where we came up with the whole concept of make life richer and happy money, happy you. Now, once you know who you are as an identity, right, introducing yourself to the world is the next step in the phase, right, in the equation. And our decision was we wanted to make sure that when we get introduced to the world, it's done with flair and it's done with gravitas, right? We wanted to be introduced overnight, and we wanted it to be a situation where overnight everybody knew the name Chocolate Finance. And the only way we could do that in a really crowded market space, in a relatively boring industry like finance, was to do something that was distinct, beautiful, and visible everywhere. So that we could end up being an overnight credible brand, right? We went from being nothing. Nobody knew what Chocolate Finance was. We were brand new, like a baby introduced into the world.
Exactly.
And we needed to become a personality that somebody understood and knew overnight, right? And our way of doing that was to really be clear about who we are, what we want customers to feel when we introduce you to Chocolate Finance, and then making that big splash.
And I love that.
As loudly as we could. So it was about the sort of breadth of visibility when it came to launch, and then layering it with the depth as we went into the next couple of months worth of building our brand.
Awesome. We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. But before we do, I have a question for Andy. So at Analytic Partners, we have the ROI Geno. It's like our sort of genie that helps forecast off the back of 800 billion data points of advertising spend. But we know from that good creative outperforms poor creative by 2.5x. So I'm going on the fact that I've seen it. It was good creative. I know you come from Sachi, Dentsu, all that sort of stuff. You have good creative. I want to hear from you, like from that creative part. That's a great brand strategy that you got. But then what was the inspiration? How did you bring that to life? And let's dig into that story a little bit.
Well, I mean, like many agencies, we started with the organizing idea, and we kind of reached that, didn't we, when we do a thing called 100 boxes, which is a brainstorming technique. And we spent a day and a half, I think, going through lots of ideas
longer.
Putting post-it notes everywhere and whatever. So we landed on Make Life Richer. Okay. So that's a really nice platform to build creative ideas on. And then myself and Anushka, we sat down and talked a lot about, there's the aesthetic of a brand, but then there's also like the voice and the personality. And so we spent a lot of time talking about what is the tone of the brand. And it should be a bit witty, it should be a bit playful. And so that was the starting point. And then you get someone like Henry Golding coming into the mix. So you've got a celebrity who's also quite playful, he's a romantic comedy type of guy, right? So that's the origins of the creative work, really, was from there. And then I guess really in a world now where no one writes headlines, we thought, well, let's write some headlines as well that are catchy and witty and interesting and cut through, and just start to build the personality.
I mean, you did build the personality. I'm not going to lie. You managed to get an ad war with GSX.
GXS, yes, we did.
Tell me about that. I mean, you definitely grabbed some headlines there with the creativity.
That was actually off of a different agency. That was our social media agency, where it was, I think it was a chocolate-driven nag at us, where they developed a campaign or just an ad around the fact that we weren't necessarily chocolate melt. So it was something along those lines. I don't exactly remember the details, but it was something to do with the physical chocolate, right? And I think we debated internally whether we should or shouldn't respond to that, and then eventually came back with a tic-tac-toe kind of game, and guess who's going to win this one? And it was done in a really playful manner, and it sort of landed and ended there, which was great.
No, I think it's lovely. I mean, you definitely have embraced that whole brand positioning that you've been talking about, making life richer. And it's lovely how it plays into the chocolate is rich and all that sort of stuff. So it's really lovely how it goes there. What I want to know next, and I don't know if there was a bit of teaming support here. I know definitely from my past experience, I've had my agencies help me when I pitch. But obviously you got a CFO that was embracing something different. But your CEO, we know he's a finance man, and it's always money, right? And we're asking for a lot when we're going big. So how did you convince him the rationale of this is the right way, this is the right positioning, but we're going to spend and we're going to go out big? How did that happen?
Walter, as a human being, right, is one of these rare gems that actually has both sides of the brain.
Okay.
Yes, he's a finance man, but he also understands the power of good creative, right? And I think his experience with building Sing Life taught him that. And I think we were lucky enough to have that example to lean on every time we talked about rationalizing the spend, right? That was one aspect of it, that in itself we were lucky that the person we were convincing didn't necessarily need as much convincing as you think. The second half of it was painting the vision, right? Really, we had options on the table. We could have been the slow growth mentality, or we could have been the get known overnight mentality, right? And we painted both visions. We showed the forecasted numbers for both visions. But at the end of the day, it boils down to the fact that at a business level, we had goals, right? We wanted to achieve a certain target AUM by the end of the year. We wanted to have a certain number of customers on our platform by the end of the year. They were harsh targets. And when I say harsh, I mean they were challenging. They were big dreams, right? And in order to support big dreams, it was just that important that we became an overnight, well-known, credible brand just as fast, right? So that we could then kick off the marketing engine to do the conversion piece after that. I mean, we mentioned this before, but as a new brand, building credibility is really important, especially when it comes to money.
Especially in the finance industry.
Nobody will trust you if they don't know you and if they don't believe in you, right? So I guess we debated that quite a lot internally. And then looking at our goals and our targets, we reverse engineered those to come up with our metrics, and our spend was really as a result of that discussion. And luckily we had the buy-in that we needed, and we were able to go big, and it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, you tried to fast track the whole brand awareness, consistency, frequency as quickly as you could. And I want to dive into that a little bit. You talked about, you had those business targets to meet. Did you do any modeling or forecasting to help you achieve that and put that forward to your
we definitely did.
team?
Look, we were a brand new brand, so we didn't have historical information to lean on.
Right.
But we did have, like I said, goals, right? We had a certain target AUM, we had a certain number of customers we wanted to achieve, and we had softer goals like our NPS scores, our app ratings, our Google ratings, referral rates, how many customers we wanted to make referrals when they joined us. And then we reverse engineered those to come up with our modeling, essentially. So what were the kind of CPMs we were looking for? What were the kind of customer acquisition costs we were hoping for across different channels? Obviously, across the funnel, we knew that that the brand awareness piece was going to be a little bit ambiguous because it doesn't necessarily always convert to direct conversions. Attribution's tricky when it comes to outdoor advertising, for example. But we did have certain goals in terms of organic traffic we wanted to meet, and then as a result, the referrals that we were hoping to achieve, and that helped us define our baseline, off the back of which we then had certain targets that we set for our media teams. And then we built our plan around it.
I was going to say, Andy, do you have anything to weigh in there? Because you've been building out those plans.
They were quite frightening objectives, and we're going, I'm not sure we can commit to that. But so they were very aggressive numbers. But I think we did a good job of reaching them.
I mean, that's an understatement. We doubled our targets in the same timeline that we were hoping to achieve Amazing. Our original goal. We had double that achieved by the end of it.
Amazing. And what was your initial launch like? When you had the launch, what was in the initial results that came out?
So our launch was, I want to say, twofold, right? The first half of it was a sort of beta launch, right, where we launched the product but in a gated manner. So you could only get access to chocolate if you knew somebody who has chocolate,
right?
Or through a wait list. So we built a bit of FOMO around this, right? And then we worked with writers and influencers to develop a bit of content around us, so that when people were searching for us, there was a lot of curiosity getting built already, right? And then when we did our big launch, the intent was to double down on that FOMO, right? You may have heard about us, you may have kind of wanted in, now here you go, here we are. And I think the first 2 to 3 months of our launch, we saw a massive spike in acquisition. So we had influencers talking about us, we had press pick up and talk about us. We had a huge number of customers join us in the first 2 months of our launch campaign. At the point, we were about 40% through our goals already in the first 2 months itself. And then we saw referral rates start to take a hike as well, in the sense that we had 1 out of 4 customers referring, which was fabulous, and a really low customer acquisition cost, which is great.
We love that.
But then at some point, obviously, as the sort of outdoor stuff started to come off, we did start to see a slight dip in the numbers, but it didn't ever go down. It kind of just dipped a little bit and then sustained itself, which was great. And I think part of that is because the way we designed the campaign was to have a big burst for the first 6 to 8 weeks. And that was, to your point, about billboards, buses, taxis, MRTs, all over the place. And the next step was to start building that layer of depth, right? So search and intent, we were constantly on top of that. Social media with our various engagement platforms, we were constantly on top of that. Building our blogs and website content so that customers had all the knowledge they needed to have before they signed up with us was another piece that was I think well structured, or at least we gave customers what they needed. And we continued to build on top of that. The digital advertising that we did across our video programmatic performed like 20% better than the industry benchmark, which is fabulous.
That's a global benchmark, by the way.
As a global benchmark. Amazing, because Singapore is so small as well.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it's not easy to do in the finance space. So I mean, kudos to the entire agency ecosystem and anybody internally who was involved, right? Because it was different and it worked.
And what do you think? I mean, because I love that. I mean, we talk about at Analytic Partners all the time how looking at when you launch, which is different to, you know, having an established brand, you do need to go big, and people often forget about out-of-home, radio, digital, and lots of stuff, or they put it in for a short amount of time, and so it doesn't have that long tail effect. So I mean, it sounds like you started to put a bit of effort in there, so you kept it going for like 6 to 8 weeks before you sort of started to pull back out.
So the whole campaign was about 6 months long.
Yep.
The outdoor component was about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep.
Some of it extended to about 12 weeks, after which the digital programmatic, the social media, the Google ads, the Meta ads, the retargeting ads is what started to do the bulk of the heavy lifting thereafter.
Yeah. I mean, we see in our research as well that, you know, by having that brand presence, it's picked up by search. The same with search helps with all of those ones. But, you know, do you have anything to add on like
No, I mean, it had a massive
out?
impact on organic.
Yeah.
Organic search, as you expect, right? I mean, this is the things that people, a lot of modern marketers don't like to do outdoor and traditional type media, but we know that when you do it, you know, people go online and they start searching, and then they go to the website or the app store and they start downloading. And so we saw that actually happen. So, you know, the impact on search was immediate almost, you know.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I really liked what Chocolate Finance you guys did is that often we talk about analytic partners of fit for purpose, fit content for purpose. So a lot of times people won't put the budget in to make sure that, you know, if it's a YouTube ad, it's designed for YouTube versus a billboard and the type of billboards that they have, rather than just taking what's on TV and putting it, like I know you had cinema as well. So I think that's one of the things that, you know, sort of blew me away, and I was very jealous as marketers going, oh my God, they've done everything like, you know, tick, 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 tick.
Oh, thank you.
Which was really, really good. But what I wanted to know is like out of those, you know, you said 20% above global benchmark, and we're in Singapore, it's small and it's finance, which is pretty tough as well. Why do you think you achieved that? What do you think? Was it messaging? Was it creative? What do you think drove that?
I think it just...
All of the above?
Well, it just cut through, right? You know, and I think, you know, kudos to Anushka and her team as well, who worked with us very closely and drove the whole aesthetic side of it. So just the feel and mood, you know, the browns and the pink stripe, and there was an aesthetic to it which was very distinct and warm and kind of luxurious, I guess is one of the words to use. So aesthetically it cut through, and it's consistent across all mediums. And then I guess then the charm of the copy, and you know, it was very kind of witty and playful, and who does that these days? And especially in financial advertising, no one. You know, that kind of art of the headline has kind of been lost. So that had a big part to play in it as well. And when you see banks start copying our work, so I think the Ching was copied, right, by about many
different people. Yeah,
it's like, really, you copying work that's out there live now is you know. So in many ways it's flattery, right? But so it just stuck out like a sore thumb. I think.
I think when we were doing our baseline research, right, we were looking at the landscape in general. It was a sea of blues and reds and greens in terms of colors.
Yes.
And then in terms of content, it was almost always a rate war.
Yes.
So it would be numbers, it would be bullet points, it would be lots of text, it would be, basically numbers wars, right?
Yeah.
And we figured you don't actually leave that feeling any sense of emotion at all.
No, I mean, I know when I was on the agency side and I did like brand strategy, and we talked about colors.
Yeah.
Like you said, definitely finance. But the reason they choose it is because it's credible.
Yeah.
But, you know, to break that mold, like I said, you're a sweet disruptor in what you do, is picking that pink. But the other thing I thought was quite cool that you did, again, so you went big, Henry Golding influences everything out of home, but then you also did the faux out of home, the one where you had the digital sort of giant pink rollout over the streets.
That was again social media. And
he's looking at me going, I didn't do anything pink on the streets.
Yeah, that was FOOH they call it, right? The fake out of home stuff. Yeah. We've done a few of those actually, and they perform quite well.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's quite interesting to see the fake digital world intersect with the real world, and it's kind of almost like a pause. What was that moment? We've done them. They have performed really well in terms of comparing creatives, right?
Okay.
These ones actually have tended to perform just at the same level as the likes of Happy Money, Happy You, Kaching, or actually just the rate sometimes on socials performs really well as well. But the fake out of home stuff has definitely got higher engagement and full watch through till the end of the video, which is cool to see.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. And actually, in general, the video watch through rate was through the roof as well.
Yeah, I watched it.
Yeah.
It was great. I mean, you can't not. I mean, look at all the people that are in there. And it's so fun, and you just want to go dance and everything like that. It's
But again, there are a lot of myths out there being propagated by the big platforms. You know, make your videos 8 seconds and whatever. Actually, the best performing ad out of all so with the video, for instance, with Henry Golding, I think we did about 21 versions, 21 edits.
Yeah.
So we did like the full minutes, the 30, and then we did like 6 seconds for YouTube. So we did the whole remit.
Yep.
But the one that performed best was the 1 minute.
Love it.
So people were watching that. I think it had an 80% watch through rate or something like that. So you go, okay, so what happened to the 8 seconds? the minute did really, really well. Yeah.
I love that. It does demystify some of these things that we're always told. And I think you're right. I think some of the platforms or, certain people go, yeah, this is great and it works, but it might work for them, might not work for someone else. But I love that. Let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the data points and the channels that worked for you, and, what was interesting, and did you pivot along the way? Did you double down on anything? Did you pull back? As it started to unfold and you started to move into the tail end of your launch, what sort of happened there from a channel perspective and from a data perspective, how you leverage that data?
Yeah, look, I think with the different areas of the funnel, right, the outdoor stuff was predominantly meant for building our brand and brand awareness, right? Every single different creative, which I've learned was a total waste of time because nobody scans the QR code.
Good to know for next time.
Good to know for next time, yes. But I think definitely there were certain locations that outperformed from an outdoor perspective compared to others. MRTs do much better than a billboard in a mall, for example. So these were learnings for us to take into our next plan.
Yep. And the buses as well, right?
Buses did really well.
Yeah, like I said, I see it everywhere.
Yeah, and the taxis actually have given us the most longevity because they've stuck on well beyond the campaign period.
What they call it? Overrun?
Overrun.
Oh, because they don't change them.
Yeah,
I always wondered about that.
Yeah.
Like they always seem to have it, and it's like
you still see them.
You still see them.
Uncle just doesn't want to take it off his taxi, likes it,
which is great for us, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
In terms of some of the other channels, there were lots of learnings in terms of YouTube performed better in certain instances. The creative fatigue was different for different channels. So the same asset performed longer on digital programmatic versus YouTube, for example. It performed, certain creative performed better in retargeting than it did as a general lead generation ad. In terms of our social media as well, there were certain aspects of creative that worked better than others. In terms of audio, that was the one thing that didn't perform as well as we'd hoped. So we had put a certain budget aside around our audio ads, but it didn't actually give us the return on investment we'd hoped, and the customer acquisition cost was much higher there.
I got a question for you because we've done a bit of research on the radio, and I also know some of the radio here, which give me their feedback. What type of messaging did you do on the radios? Was it brand or was it product?
It was digital audio.
It's digital.
It wasn't radio.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So
it was radio as well as digital. Yeah.
Yeah. No. But it was like the Spotify's and it was the podcast kind of networks.
Okay.
Yeah, rather than the MediaCorp.
Okay, that's interesting as well.
So it was a digital rather than traditional.
Okay. Yeah, only because I've seen product. With radio some of the feedback, and it's the same here in Singapore, is that, typically it's written in a script, not necessarily the way that you want it. And it's sort of put out there, old-fashioned way of sort of bye-bye now type thing versus the brand messaging you were doing.
I've always not been a very big fan of radio because, and it's very hard to do creative on radio, right? Because it's audio, but for me, video it's just so much more emotional. You're seeing something visual, you're hearing the audio.
Yeah.
So it's just more kind of, in your face. And so actually when we did the audio network stuff, when we switched to a second screen type format, so we're showing actually video, and there's actually a link where we can click as well. It started performing, but
much better than before that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the audio, the radio type creative wasn't as effective.
But just coming back to your question, it was product led.
Okay.
The ad that we had out there, and I think right at the end of the campaign, we switched it to
a brand,
a bit more brand, and it performed much better.
Yeah.
Than
That's what we see. That's what we saw.
Yeah, which was really interesting. Yeah. And then just on the budgeting as well, right? With the programmatic tools that we were using, we were constantly optimizing the budgets. Week on week, things would be recalibrated, right? So you might spend a little more on Meta today, you might spend a little more on digital programmatic tomorrow, you might spend a little more on retargeting the next week. There was constant recalibration of budgets across the different channels digitally.
Awesome. The CMO office is brought to you by Analytic Partners, the global leader in commercial analytics, which turns data into expertise to help marketers make the impact in the C-suite we need. What kind of impact? $50 spent on Analytic Partners last year, we returned $70 in incremental revenue. To find out more, go to analyticpartners.com. I got a question. So on average, we know a brand can lose almost 15% of its business if a competitor doubles its marketing investment. So you came in. Did you see, because obviously you've got your benchmarks, right? So did you see when you came in, all of a sudden, a bit of a drop in share when you came into the market so splashy because you had such great results compared to your competitors? Did they lose ground?
Do you know, this is an interesting question because we thought that it would be a take from here and put it in there result. But actually customers in Singapore have a lot of money and they're all multi-banked, right? So
this is true. I am.
Yeah. So actually we're not entirely sure where the money's come from. Is it something that was lying in a savings account that you didn't otherwise use and then you put it into chocolate? Was it a little bit from everywhere? Yeah. We're not entirely sure where customers' money has actually come from. But we didn't see an adverse reaction from other competitors. Like they didn't immediately raise their rates or they didn't immediately do large splashy campaigns to balance out what we did, right? So the conclusion from our end is that actually customers in Singapore do have a lot of cash lying in different spaces that they just brought into chocolate, right? And I think we were quite happy with our average balances that we saw. They were a healthy amount. They were sort of the level that we were hoping for them to be at, but significantly higher than the standard average balance in Singapore, which was also exciting to see.
That is exciting.
But I think you also said as well, Anushka, that it's a different category as well. You know, chocolate created a new category.
Yeah.
So we weren't going out there with a product which is like for like.
Yeah.
We were kind of competing, I guess, against time deposits, but not, but it's not really the same. So who do you take market share off, really?
True, but I think like you had to build that credibility pretty quickly and for people to understand it was a new category that they wanted. Yeah. I mean, that's always the thing, the demand, right? So you had to quickly develop that demand for a new category. So I think you've done a good job on that. I want to know, were there any anxious moments? I'm assuming there was from both of you.
Many
Give me your highlights.
Moments.
Give me your highlights, one each or two each.
When you're innovating new products, right, there's almost always going to be several bumps on the road, right? And each bump is scary when you're a startup because it can derail you into different directions, right? One example specifically when it comes to marketing that sticks to my mind is at one point during our marketing when we were at our peak, all extremely integrated, excited, really, really happy with what we were doing, Facebook shut off our account.
Oh.
Overnight.
Really?
Which was terrifying. We got pinged in the morning with lots of messages coming through from our agencies and on our own Meta account saying your account's been suspended. And we had no idea why. And all it tells you is the bot message, right? You have violated community standards. So we're like busy looking at all the community standards, appealing, trying to understand what's going on. 2 days passed, 3 days passed, no action, no way for us to react to this. And so we had to set up a temporary account to start doing advertising there. But naturally, you've got all this credibility you've built on one account that you now need to try and rebuild on the other, which slowed our numbers down, right? The good thing about this is that this accidental experiment taught us that our advertising was working, which is great because the numbers immediately dipped, right? Bad thing is obviously that there was a couple of days worth of not as strong advertising.
Yep.
And it took us many, many sleepless nights to get it back to where it was. And to actually find human beings within Meta that could actually help us bypass the AI systems that then eventually, days later, got our Meta account back for us, right? Which was, anxiety is the least...
I can imagine.
Least polite way to put it.
I can imagine that would be terrifying.
And
it was
Andy, absolutely terrifying.
How about
Well,
you?
no, I mean, let's build on that. I mean, there's two things. One, all the skeptics, in chocolate that were skeptical about advertising. Not
Right.
Walter, because Walter's a big believer in it.
Yep.
Suddenly realised that actually it worked, right? Because there was an instant drop in deposits. But also the other thing with Meta, we know, right? Once that happens, you realise that their whole system is driven by AI.
Yes.
And it threatened to ban chocolate for 10 years.
Oh my goodness.
And then so actually our media guy he managed to get in touch with some regional people but they find also those people the humans actually find it hard to intervene because of the way the system's been built. So that was quite a terrifying moment, and we were trying to think about, okay, if that does get banned for 10 years, how do we rejig that so we can actually, because you can't run ads if it gets blocked, right?
Exactly.
So, I guess there was a few times I'm very confident in doing advertising because over the years I've met some very, very cautious clients who are just, but people are gonna talk about that. So yeah, it's good. If people talk about your advertising, great. And I remember I've reassured Anushka a few times, is it going to work? Said, of course it's going to work. And absolute confidence because I've seen it too many times. And Walter, I think as well, was getting some people in his ear saying, chocolate's not a great name and this, that, and the other and whatever. And I say, Walter, don't worry. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a huge success.
I feel like it has been a huge
and
success.
I've been in this business for 40 years. I know when you do these kinds of campaigns, you're going, no one else is doing this. It's going to stand. You've got a great product and you're going to go create an amazing brand. And so I didn't have any anxious moments myself.
Okay.
But I could see there was some anxious...
Like, I know about that. I feel like she's like, I got some side messages.
I'm sure she'll remind me if I had some anxious moments. But no, I was always very confident about it. But that Facebook one was the interesting one.
Wow. Yeah.
Imagine 10 years from now when the AIs are in even more control.
Yeah.
It's scary as hell.
I mean, I've managed crisis comms in my time, and still I feel like that is more nerve-wracking and anxious over some of the crisis comms I've dealt with. Yeah. My goodness. Right. Moving along then, what's next from a creative perspective for Chocolate Finance? Like, I know the brand has now been established, but any new exciting things? Like, you seem to like really not just go splashy and go big, but also challenge some of the ways that you're doing things. So is there anything exciting coming up or anything you're testing out?
Lots of different mini projects that we're starting to put together, and then some really big ones too. Our brand is established but still new. Like, I think it will still take time for us to seep through to your layman average customer, right? We've done a great job at activating the early adopters. We've done a good job at starting to seep through into the market where customers aren't looking for us. We're instead going and saying hello to them. Mm-hmm. But I think there's still a long way to go. Singapore's got $9 billion worth of money sitting in bank accounts, and we're nowhere near that AUM, right? So there's definitely a long way to go when it comes to building brand and credibility here. Yeah. So we've got a couple of different things in the pipeline in terms of fun features we're hoping to introduce into the app, new products we're hoping to launch into the app at some stage. But then also bigger plans to then take that same sense of happy money and take it into other markets. So we're looking to expand into possibly Hong Kong, possibly UAE, possibly Japan.
Wow, exciting.
And we've got a hope and a dream that this brand that we're building here will someday become a nice, big, global, bold brand name.
Before we wrap up, a couple of things. So before I give you some rapid fire questions, just for fun, like to know if both of you, if you could wrap up sort of, biggest moment of pulling this all together that you're most memorable, can be good or bad. I know we've shared the Facebook one, but something that's more memorable for you as well, and anything else that you'd like to share about the Chocolate Finance launch.
Coming from an agency life, right? I've worked with several clients, seen many different people walk up to the edge of, yes, we'll be creatively bold, and then you turn back rapidly and run the other way, right? For me, I think my most memorable moment was when we decided to take that plunge. So we signed on the media sheet, but the day we made the payment, and I was like, this is real. We are really doing this. That, for me, was the most memorable moment attached to it when we walked around Singapore and actually saw all of our work across the board, right? It was brilliant. And it was almost like one of those moments where you know there's no turning back with this brand. We're going to just go big and keep going up and up and up from here, right? And the hope is, like I said, for us to one day become as big as Revolut or as big as Wise or even bigger if possible, right? And really evoke that sense of joy back in finance. And finances are meant not to be boring or not to be a burden to you. They're meant to enable your life, right? Which is when we say make life richer. I hope that at someday chocolate as a brand will become so big that it really is the definition of a richer life, in whatever that means to you, right? It mean different things to you, different things to Andy, different things to me. But I hope that it becomes just like Apple is for anything innovative when it comes to technology. Chocolate becomes that enabler of life.
Big dreams. I love that. And you, Andy?
Yeah, I think, getting clients to buy big ideas has been very, very tough. I think everyone went very digital.
Yeah.
Brand became a thing of, well, that's gone now. Brands don't really exist. It's all about kind of rational content kind of stuff. And no, it's been a massive pleasure working with Anushka and Walter on bringing alive a completely new brand, which is also a rare thing to do. I've only done it about 4 or 5 times in my whole career.
Yeah.
But to be able to do something really powerful and cut through and creative, and something that really, as you pointed out, Nikki, something that actually really cut through the marketing landscape in Singapore, they don't come along very often. So it's just a joy when we saw it launching and started seeing it on the roads and started seeing the MRT takeovers. It was just a great feeling because as a creative, right, you're going, okay, and also it's not kind of a little 1-page ad that you're trying to win an award with. It's a big, proper campaign that's going to have an impact on a business and it's going to have an impact on people's lives.
No, I think that's great. And I think hopefully our listeners can definitely now understand, brand is important. And when you're launching, it's not just about the digital. It has that long tail effect on everything. And,
absolutely.
We have to invest in brand, even if it's small amounts when you're going forward, but definitely if you're launching. And like you said, you put the scenarios out there. Do you want to go fast? Do you want to go overnight? Or do you want to slowly build this up? We can go either way, but there's a budget attached to it and there's a different thing attached to it. And I think that Chocolate Finds has done a wonderful job of really showing the marketers. Hopefully more of us will stand on the edge and say, okay, we're ready. Let's go. Let's jump. Because like I said, it's always one of our dreams. All right.